I recently became an aunt. And I will confess, I didn't think much about finances for children before my niece came along. Now, when it comes to a child's future, we know that some parents can sometimes be overprotective, right? The ang pao money, give it to me. I'm going to put it in a savings account straight away. Topping up the CPF account. Every kid gets a CPF account. I just found out this when I became an aunt, by the way. And a lot of parents do this thinking that's the safe thing to do. But in a world where inflation is rising, there's so much economic uncertainty as well. Is this safe enough? Especially when you have a newborn or when you are about to have a newborn. Welcome back to the Money Talks podcast. I'm Andrea Heng, and we know that we all want the best for our kids, right? They're the future of our generation. But for many parents, how to invest becomes more overwhelming than the why they want to invest in their kids. Joining me today to perhaps build a plan for your children is Mahesh Sethuraman, Singapore CEO of Saxo. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure, Andrea.
So let's first ask you, when you first had your kids, or your first one,
Yep.
what was the first thing that you did financially for them?
That's a very good question because it allowed me to kind of reset, right? In many ways, when you have kids, and I'm kind of probably revealing too much here, you feel like you want to fix all the errors of your childhood on them.
Right, that's the
Right.
feeling I'm hearing from a lot of parents
Yes.
too.
But on the contrary, when it comes to investing, it's a great clean slate for me, right? So for instance, as someone who's been an active professional trader, there's that ego in me which believes that I can beat the market. Right? The odds are very, very low. The percentage of people who can beat the market on a consistent basis is probably 1 percentile.
And that's coming from a professional like you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, less than
Okay.
1 percentile. Probably 1 percentile is an extraordinary generous
Okay.
interpretation. And that too, to be able to do that over many years, I mean, the odds are, even someone like Warren Buffett, for instance, who's beaten the market in the last 50 years, has not beaten the market in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Unless you believe you're better than Warren Buffett.
So what did you do when you had your kid?
So it allows me a reset, right? So now, on my personal investment, which I invest for myself, I can't let go of the ego. I would still like to think that I can beat the market. But when it comes to my kids, you have plenty of advantages because you start from scratch.
Okay,
They don't have any immediate expense.
that's right.
It's a little insurance that you're buying for them, right? Which means, one, you're allowed to take a little bit of risk, and you're allowed to have a long-term vision,
Okay.
and you're allowed to start from scratch, which means that you can surrender your ego and look at the market and say, okay, if I invest in the market and let it compound for, let's say, the next 20 years, they're safe.
Okay, so you definitely have something then for your two kids. You have two kids, right?
Yes, I have 2 kids,
Okay,
a son
and
and
so
a
they're
daughter.
set. So what I'm hearing from you is when you have kids, you're resetting not just in life, but you're resetting an investment like almost like an investment virgin. You can start
Yes,
from scratch.
yes,
Okay, clean slate.
clean slate. And that allows you personally to fix a lot of the things that you wish. See, for instance, in my case, I would always say, but if I started before 2008, I would
Yeah.
have just followed the market.
Should have, would have, could have,
Yeah,
right?
but because I happened to have the misfortune of starting to invest well after 2008 when everything was expensive, I had the pressure of beating the market by making more active choices.
Yeah.
But these are all excuses. But with my kids, I don't have that problem because they don't need this money for at least 20 years.
Yes.
So then, okay, let the market do the job.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up because I'm wondering now if there's such a thing as too early. So, in Singapore, we're famous for being kiasu, right? We want to beat everything, not just the market, but just everything in life. We want to see how much we can anticipate so that, we can curb any losses potentially, right?
Yeah.
Is there such a thing as too early to invest in a child? So if my sister-in-law had been pregnant, whenever she was pregnant, right, I would say, oh, you're pregnant? Okay, I'm going to invest something in something now for your future child. Is that too early?
No, I can relate to this kiasu behavior because people tend to sort of look for primary schools, preschools when they're pregnant
Oh,
and so on.
yes.
Even if you're planning to have a kid,
Yeah.
it's never a bad time to start because worst case, let's say you decide not to have a kid.
Yeah.
Well, the money is yours.
That's true.
Right. So,
Yeah. It's a
and-
win-win situation.
and
in a way.
usually people do the opposite because when you, and you don't appreciate it when you start having kids, the amount of effort it takes from your side is so high. You're worried about their health, they'll get the fever, will they get the primary school you want? and what CCA to do, what other enrichment classes to
Yeah.
send. It's a sort of a treadmill run, right? And then when you're on the treadmill, you kind of forget the basics.
Yeah.
So it's, in fact, starting early allows you to sort of set a clean, slate for this, so that you can focus on the rest.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually. Now, if a parent starts the day that they get that birth certificate,
Yep.
right? What kind of advantage are they actually giving the child? So you talked more about how it benefits you as a parent, as the adult
Yep.
in the picture.
Yeah.
Whether or not you have a kid, you have this runway and that money is still yours for you to draw upon. But
Yeah.
what about the child? How does it benefit the child starting early?
As a parent, what you want to give your kids is the best platform for them to succeed in life.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from creating the right set of behaviors, giving them the right set of values. So when it comes to money, of course, you don't want to hand them over a big check when they're 20.
Yeah.
Because, as Asians particularly, we are also worried what it's going to do to their behavior.
That's right.
Are they going to have a sense of entitlement and so on? The idea of investing is to ensure that there is a floor, that they don't fall behind, no matter what career paths they take. And money doesn't come in the way of them achieving their success. For instance, my nephew has just finished his A-levels and he's planning to do his medicine, for instance, right? And just yesterday I was talking to my brother and he was looking at the cost. There's a particular cost if he goes to the local universities, and there's a particular cost if he has to go abroad. Now, at that stage, you don't want to hamper his dream because you're worried about your finances.
Yeah.
So what this gives you is the wings for them to fly. Right? It is not to give them a sense of entitlement that they don't have to worry about working hard.
Yeah.
It's just that the money doesn't come in the way of them achieving their dreams.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a good point as well. So here in Singapore, we have a lot of parents that rely on things like baby bonus. If you don't intend to use the money now and you plan to invest, so how should we then treat this money?
Yeah, it's always good to have a lump sum, right? See, there are two ways of going about it. There's a lump sum to start with, and then there's a regular savings plan that you want to have for your kids. And again, having kids is not particularly affordable anywhere in the world, not just in Singapore. So you got to ensure that you have your monthly budget sorted out, and on top of it, whatever excess you have, you got to save for yourself, and then there's a stream that you want to save for your kids. Once you have the basic mental map of that ready, then you can figure out. For a lump sum, you start with saying, okay, I want to start investing. Let's say if I were to start from scratch today, let's say if I got that bonus today, and let's say my kid was born yesterday, right? I would open an investment account where, so my advice to people is three things when it comes to pillars of long-term wealth creation, right? You got to stay diversified, you got to stay invested, and you got to stay disciplined. Now, this sounds like, okay, be happy in life, right?
Yeah.
It's so broad, so generic that I'm not telling them anything.
It's very abstract.
Very abstract, right? So if I have to convert the abstract into more sort of specific things, so what do I mean by that? When you want to stay invested, which means that you don't want to be having a view on the market that today it's expensive, tomorrow it's cheap, and so on, right? So always be invested because you don't know when the market is going to go up and when the market is going to go down.
So think long term.
Think long term.
Okay.
Be invested. Always be invested, no matter what your view is, right? Then stay diversified. Let's say today NVIDIA is a stock of the sort of times, right? But till 5 years back, it is not such a big stock.
Yeah.
Right. If we did this interview in the 80s, I would have probably said GE. Right?
Yeah.
Invest in GE, you're safe.
Correct. Yes.
If we did this in the 90s, I would have probably said IBM. But the fact of the matter is that you cannot predict what will be the blue chip stock 30 years down the line.
That's right.
So it's important, especially when it comes to investing on your kids' future, to have a very broad, diversified exposure. And typically, you go for an index tracking ETF.
Okay.
Now, again, which index, right? The good part about investing for kids is that it makes a lot of decisions very easy.
Yeah.
Because the time horizon is long, the savings structure is very regular. It's not an active choice, it's a passive choice.
Yeah.
Then you only make a few choices, right? You invest in an all-world index, or you invest in an S&P 500 index, or you could choose some specific geographies if you are keen. But to keep things simple, even if you invest in an all-world index, 70% of the exposure is US.
Yeah.
So there's no running away from US.
That's right. Yeah.
So which means that, let's say if I were to do it, I would probably invest in an S&P 500 index, a regular savings plan every month.
Okay.
So I have a plan for my son and I have a plan for my daughter.
Okay.
And every month I invest a certain sum in both their accounts, just tracking one index.
Right.
I try to keep things simple.
Clean and
very
simple.
clean. Right.
And that's the last thing you want as a parent, an extra burden to think about, right?
Yes.
At the back of your head. You have to deal with a child's injury and a child's illness. And you don't want to have to think about, oh, this index is not doing well or this stock is not doing well. Just go for a broad-based index.
Yeah.
That gives you healthy exposure.
And also, and the other part about staying invested is that if it's an active choice, like today, if I have to send the money to invest, I'm like, oh, but today the market is looking too expensive. Let me wait. But I don't wait for paying my rent.
That's
The
true.
moment my salary comes, the rent gets deducted. Right? The tax gets deducted on its own. Similarly, this automatically fetches the money and invests on the 5th of every month, so that the timing is taken out of my hands. The discipline of transferring the funds is taken out of my hands.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the way to go about it.
Yeah, that's the third pillar you were talking about, right? Staying disciplined,
Yes.
right? And to make things easier for us, I think there are so many tools out there that help us automate that discipline so that we
Yes.
don't have to think about it anymore. This works for adults too, by the way. So it's
Yeah.
not just for your kid. So for parents who are terrified of losing their children's milk powder money in a market crash,
Yeah.
how should they shift their mindset when it comes to risk?
Yeah, that's a good question, but that's got nothing to do with kids, right? It's your belief in markets.
True.
Right.
But I think the premise here is that you're investing what you have allocated as money for your children.
I know, but
Yeah.
it becomes a lot easier. Okay, let's take the example of two people, right?
Sure.
Someone who's comfortable with the market going up and down, let's say me,
Okay.
and let's say somebody else, let's say my dad, for instance, he doesn't like the fact that it's volatile, right?
Right.
What if I need the money tomorrow and then the market falls 30%? Legitimate.
Okay.
Absolutely legitimate.
Okay.
Right. But the fact that you're doing it for your kids actually makes it a lot easier, because let's assume that there could be a crash in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
If I'm saving for my retirement, it has a much bigger impact on when I take out the money. Whereas for them, I'm like, okay, then I'm going to invest. In fact, if I have a 20-year horizon, if there is a crash in the next 2 years, I'm going to invest for the next 18 years after
Yeah.
that, which means I participate in the crash.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And the market will eventually revive. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at the history, the Great Depression is the only period in which they had a 30-year period where the market didn't come back to the same heights. But even in Great Depression, if you're following a regular savings plan, you actually spent a lot of the time buying at the lows,
Yeah.
right? Unless
Yeah.
you bought the peak.
Yes.
See, that's the problem
So
with
you're
the lump sum
buying
investment.
dips.
You're
Yeah.
buying the dips.
Yeah.
So if you are a bit nervous about the market moves up and down, particularly the down moves, in fact, investing for the kids is the best way to solve for it, because
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about tomorrow. You're worrying 20 years later.
Yeah.
Of course, if you're starting to invest when the kid is 15, then the dilemma is slightly different.
Okay.
Then you definitely have to be more prudent. Your allocation to equities should be a lot lesser, and increase your allocation to fixed income, right? You could have a 60-40 portfolio. You could have a 50-50 portfolio. And I kind of want to address that again, because it's easy to start from zero.
Yeah.
But in reality, a lot of people don't start from zero.
That's true.
Like my kids are 9 and 6. Let's assume I start today.
Yeah.
Would I be as embracing of equities 100% as, let's say, if I started at zero? Perhaps not. In my
Right.
case, I am.
Okay.
But I can imagine another person saying, okay,
Yeah.
but I want him to go to college at 20. Then I only have 11 years.
Yeah.
And what if there's a crash in between? Sure, you can play around with that a little bit, primarily in the form of equity to debt sort of
Okay.
exposure. But broadly, unless you're starting at 15, then your risk appetite goes down a lot. So long as you start anywhere before 10, I think the approach is the same.
Okay. So it's really just going back to the fact that you have this long runway. Take advantage of that.
Yes.
Right? Have
Yes.
that long runway in mind every single time you're
Yes.
worried or you're concerned about taking risk, right? All right. So you mentioned, talking about ETFs, right? Like, for example, the All World ETF gives you exposure to about 70% US stocks. The
Yeah.
rest is made up of other stocks as well. So what would an ideal portfolio look like? Because here's the thing. I've had my own consultations about what I should do for my niece.
Yep.
And I've heard things like, set up an endowment fund,
Yeah.
or get onto an endowment plan, or just dump it into a high interest savings account. So I'm hearing all sorts of ideas here. What to you then looks like an ideal portfolio? You talked briefly about ETFs there. Is that the way to go?
Yes. And again, there are different kinds of ETFs. You could
Sure.
also have a high dividend ETF. But I'll probably go out on a limb and say that the most important exposure to have is growth equities,
Okay.
because what can you predict? See, we can, let's take the period of 2008 to 2020,
Okay.
right? It's a period of extreme low inflation. You would like to think that if you had your cash, you didn't lose much of the value,
Correct.
so to speak. But that's only retail inflation. That's because the price of mobile phones went down, the price of TV went down. But if you look at asset price inflation, the condo prices went up.
Yeah.
But even within the retail inflation, the cost of hospitalization, the cost of healthcare went up a lot. college tuition, at least in the US, has been the most inflated item year after year after year.
That's true.
So if you're investing for your kids for the future, what are you doing? You're investing for potentially them buying their own house, for ensuring that their healthcare needs are taken care of, and most importantly for their education. And that inflation is headed only one way. And you're not going to be able to beat it by having a high dividend exposure or a high interest rate savings exposure and so on. It's extremely important to be invested in the future growth of the world.
So thinking about investing to beat inflation.
To beat asset price inflation, that's the most important thing, right? If you want to beat asset price inflation, you got to be invested in asset prices. And the most liquid and the most healthy asset prices that you can track over the long term, and very diversified also, is a broad-based equity index.
Okay. So you talked about there being growth stocks, but I think, again, I'm bringing up volatility because it scares a lot of people, right? And growth stocks have been quite volatile. So how do we know what's a good growth stock to invest in? Because we've seen what were good growth stocks in COVID come tumbling down also. And sometimes it does feel like they're not going to come back up to their glory days, right? So do we do sort of a review and recalibration of the portfolio midway in these kinds of situations, halfway through that 20-year journey? If we feel like we need to pivot and adjust, can we do that? Would you recommend doing that?
No, I highly avoid being tactical about these investments.
Okay.
So the idea of a growth stock, I mean, when I say growth equity, I'm not really talking about stocks.
Sure.
I'm not asking you to buy Nvidia because that's the hottest stock in town, because I don't know if it'll be the hottest stock 20 years down the line.
Right.
But what I do know with fair amount of certainty is that if you invest in an all-world index, if you invest in an S&P 500 index, if Nvidia falls and some other new stock arises,
everyone else
the index will pick it up.
Mm.
So you just have to tag along.
Right.
So, I mean, unless there is like a massive world war and, you know, the whole system changes, right? Then you're not worried about your investment. You're worried about so many other things. I don't think there's a need for you to review this. The only reason for you to review this is as you get closer to the time, let's say they're 18, they go to NS. If it's a boy, he goes to NS. Or if it's a girl at 16, you start worrying about, okay, next 3-4 years, I might need the money for college. Then you might want to prune your exposure to equities and increase it to fixed income.
I see.
But that's like very, very close.
Yeah.
And in most cases, especially if you're working and you're active, it's very likely that you're going to be able to use your income to fund it. Then you keep it going. I mean, you're starting with an intention to use it for college. But if you don't need it, don't take it out.
Yeah.
Let it run. And maybe they might need it for their first housing. Maybe they might need it for their wedding.
Yeah.
Or maybe they might not need it at all. Maybe you just hand it over to them when you're gone. But I'm just saying that this is still an insurance.
Yeah.
This is not a certainty that at 20 you'll take it out. You give yourself the option to take it out at 20, but in an ideal world, you want to keep it running.
Yeah.
Right. So I come from a working sort of family, right? My dad was a salaried employee. I'm a salaried employee. But I had the fortune of working for a businessman. And he comes from a traditional business family. So they've been, handing over business from their previous generation to the next and so on.
Yes.
I got this great insight from him, which I had it never occurred to me that way, that he was talking to another rich family person. And he was saying that, see, this wealth belongs to my future generation.
Yeah.
I'm merely the custodian of this wealth. I can take it out for my livelihood.
Yeah.
But I have to preserve this for future generations. He's not talking about his kids. He's talking about future generations, right?
Beyond his kids.
Beyond his kids.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the way they think about it. And that's a great way of thinking about it. Now, of course, I don't have a business to hand over, but if I have a portfolio to hand over, you got to assume that it keeps going.
Yeah.
Unless you have an absolute need for it, then you take it out. Otherwise, it keeps going. So then if they don't need it at 20, if I earn enough to fund their education, then I'll keep the investment going.
That's kind of like legacy thinking,
Yes.
essentially.
Yes.
That's what we're doing here, right? So you talked about handing over, and that's what I wanted to talk about next, right? What happens with that handover? When should we have that conversation with our child? Do we even tell our child that we've basically been investing the last 20 years for him or for her?
That's a deeply personal question. And I'm not going to give a prescriptive answer to that, but I can tell you what I would do. Right? Personally, I don't want them to be aware of how much I've invested in their name or something.
Oops. Sorry.
So personally, I don't want them to know. Not because, I want to hide it from them.
Okay.
But what are you trying to do as a parent? You're trying to give them a platform. You're trying to ensure that there's a safety net. That's it.
Okay.
And at the same time, like Asians, we don't want them to get carried away with it, right? So I wouldn't hand it over to them unless there's a need for it. Which means if they're going to college and I don't have enough money, I don't want that to come in the way of them pursuing their dream.
Sure.
So then I'll give you the money.
Okay.
But let's say your college is funded.
Yep.
Then I'll hold it for your wedding.
Okay.
Let's say you are earning well enough. You keep going. Let's say you don't have money for your first down payment. I'm happy to pinch in for that.
So it's a surprise egg that you're going to whip
Exactly.
out when the time calls for it.
It's basically a buffer. If you fall short of something that you want to do, and if it's for a good reason,
Right.
sure, then
Okay.
then take it from this.
Right.
But think of it as pool not for you, but for your future generation, right?
Mm.
So maybe when they're 30, I'll have that conversation. When they, assuming they're married or they want to have kids, or they might not choose to, that's a different story. Then the conversation will be different. Let's assume the scenario where they're 30 and they're probably either getting married or thinking of getting married and they want to have kids. Then I'll have that conversation saying, okay, this is what I built for you. In an ideal world, I want you to carry this on to the next generation, provided you can afford it.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't, by all means use it. This is for you.
Yeah.
But if you can, you're in a good job, you're doing well for your life, keep it going.
Yeah.
Hand it forward.
The takeaway I'm getting from our conversation here, Mahesh, is to think about investing for your child not as a separate portfolio. It's really just you're squirreling away money, putting it in something that grows, and I don't have to think about it, much like how some of us might want to think about our own investments, right? So it doesn't have to be an account for my child or portfolio for my child. It doesn't have to be separated that
Yes.
way, right? They're not separate channels necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's exactly how you teach them behavior. Right?
Yeah.
Why do you want them to eat healthy? Why do you want them to sleep on time? It's not because you have a particular need for that now. You're preparing them to be good adults later.
That's right.
And you're exactly doing the same in the form of finances here.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy to live by, actually. You talked about how you hope that if and when you do have that conversation with your child about this investment that you've been growing for them, right? How do you involve the child in that, in this particular investment process? If we're not outrightly telling them that, I'm doing this for you,
Yeah.
how can we involve them then so that when we do have to hand it over to them,
Sure.
they have that same thinking that you have. Okay, I can use it, but I can also grow it for my next generation.
Yes.
How do you impart that wisdom to your child?
Sure. I have a slightly controversial take on this.
Okay.
Because I come from the industry and I've spent all my life being absolutely fascinated by the markets. I love it. I don't see it as pressure. I'm happy to trade. If there's markets open on Saturday and Sunday, I will trade it. I love it. I can talk to you. I can trade. I can come back to the conversation. It doesn't affect my life.
Wow.
The market is 20% down. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect my life.
Wow.
I enjoy it. But having said that, for most people, it's not their cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids have a fascinating future ahead of them. The world is full of plenty of upside surprises for them. They're interested in sports, they're interested in music, they're interested in arts, and I hope that investment ensures that they can pursue whatever they want in their life, which means keep it as simple as possible. Don't think about buying the next big Nvidia. In the long run, the index gives you the return. Let's take the example of S&P 500, right? It gives you 10% in compounded return over the long term, and you don't have to move an inch. Just sit and relax and focus on what you want to do.
Yeah.
You want to do a podcast? Fantastic. You want to produce a music album? Even better. And to be able to do that without having to worry about money is the best insurance you can get in life. So my advice would be to tell them that over the last 20 years, let's say I have this conversation at 20,
Sure.
over the last 20 years, this is how simple I've kept it for you, and this is what it has delivered for you. You can choose to do the same and focus on pursuing your dreams. Unless, of course, your dream is something like me, where you enjoy playing around in the markets, then by all means, go ahead.
Yeah.
But even then, I would like you to set this aside for the rest of your family. Take a little bit of money and play it for yourself.
Yeah.
But don't hold the family to ransom for your passion, so to speak. Right?
That's true. That's also true. And that's an important thing that this next generation needs to learn how to do as well. Because I think some of us still have that hang up, right? So before we let you go, there's one final question, and that's for the parents who feel like, oh, maybe I started this journey too late. And you shed a bit of light earlier on, if we're starting at 15, 9, 6, whatever, right? If they feel like perhaps they've started too late, maybe their kids are about 10 years old now.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Well, that's a great question. And I kind of probably take a detour here because I'm reading a lot of parenting books right now. And, my son is 9, but he behaves like 13. So I need a little bit of help. And in all the parenting books, some of the really good books, it's the same dilemma, right? Okay, but I'm already crossed that stage. Did I mess it up? They're already 15. Did I mess it up?
Yeah.
Well, it's never too late. It's probably the same thing with your health, right? You ate junk for like majority of your life. It's never a bad time to start eating healthy. It's never a bad time to start working out. So similarly, it's never a bad time to start sort of consciously thinking about it.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not going to pretend that there's no difference. When you start at 0 or when you start at 3, for instance, you have a freeway ahead of you.
Sure.
When you start at 15, of course, there are a lot more constraints, right? There's a pavement here, the road narrows down a little bit and it expands a little bit. You got to increase your speed, decrease your speed a
Yeah.
little bit. The only difference is that at 15, would I suggest that you go all in 100% on an equity index? Perhaps not.
Okay.
So have a little bit of money market funds, like absolute money that you need immediately for any sort of emergency requirements. Then have a little bit of exposure to fixed income so that when the market goes down, it kind of insulates your portfolio a little bit.
Yes.
And have, again, it depends on your risk appetite, right? Maybe 50% exposure to equities, in some cases, maybe even 70%. But you should probably think a little bit more about the risk metrics
Yeah.
and have less allocation to equities. But it's never a bad time to start.
It's never a bad time to start. Even for us big kids who are not teens anymore, it's still never too late. And it's something that we always say here on the Money Talks podcast. Mahesh, this has been great. You've inspired me. I have some ideas now on what to do for my niece, and I'm not going to tell my brother, unless he watches this, of course. Thank you so much for all of the tips and tricks that you had for us today.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
And to you, our Money Talks community, thank you for tuning in. Now it's question time for all of you. What's the one thing that you wish your parents had invested in for you when you were born? I want to get some ideas and thoughts for you. No parent bashing here, okay? Just let us know on where you find our podcast or where you're listening to us from. Or you can also email us directly, cnapodcasts@mediacorp.com.sg. That's it for the Money Talks podcast. I'm Andrea Heng, signing off.